Right, thank you very much, and welcome to this session here. Today we are going to explore a little bit what a writing center is, the concept of a writing center, and perhaps a little bit we'll start with the history of a writing center. So I have a short presentation here. It's an adapted version from what I used when I visited in November. It's a kind of short introductory presentation, but please feel free to interrupt whenever. And I think and I hope that today will be a day of discussion rather than me talking. So I think we will together work this through in a good way. But nevertheless, I thought I'd start with something. So, Language and Beyond is the title of this, the idea of a European, in this case, writing center. So what I'm going to present is the writing center where I work. So I'm the director for Chalmers Writing Center. I work for the Division for Language and Communication at Chalmers University of Technology. So I teach a lot of different courses when it comes to writing, academic writing, technical writing, in Swedish and in English. So that's my main field. And communication is a very broad field, of course. So it entails anything from writing and speaking, but also into the disciplinary writing and speaking, of course, because I work within the different engineering disciplines and different engineering fields. I also work some with intercultural communication. So that's my general background. But today I'm going to talk about the writing center, I think. I'll have to click. So first, just a very brief story or history where writing centers started. Many people think they started in the 70s, 1970s, and that is true to some extent, but there are evidence of very early writing centers basically from the turn of the century, 1900. But they are very few and they looked very different. The sort of general background to this is, of course, the tutorial situation they had in universities, where you didn't used to have large lectures, but you had a student and a mentor, and you develop your skills through that kind of discussion. Then academia and education changed and became mass education, and then the situation was different. So then I would say if we go back to the 60s or 70s, and this is in the United States of America, this is where it all started. They started with writing laboratories, they started with writing clinics, and as you hear from the words, laboratories, clinics, it has some kind of ring to it that might be problematic today, because this implies that it was a remedy to poor writing. And that was true. So what they saw was students struggling with their writing, so they needed to have some kind of structured support to that, to help the students improve their writing. Then there was a gradual shift in how writing instruction was viewed. And that was that we now see more of academic skills and learning centers emerging, and writing centers. And one key component of this shift was also the introduction of peer tutors, that is, students working as tutors. So fellow students helping other students. So this gradual shift meant a lot of things, of course. And one of the takeaways is that it enables the students. So that makes the students more powerful in their own learning situation. Rather than saying, oh, your writing is very poor, go to the writing center and have your cure, take your medicine. Then this was, okay, how can we help the students grow and establish and develop their own writing skills? So writing centers in Europe, that's a much younger thing. So essentially that started, there are some in Germany that started quite early, but apart from that, it's something that started in the 90s and during the 2000 period. So it's very recent in Europe. And then Chalmers Writing Center, which is situated at Chalmers University of Technology. We have 2 campuses in the city. They're very nice. And we therefore have 2 writing centers as well. It's the same organization, but we have 2 places for the writing center, just to accommodate for the students so they don't have to travel through the city. And it's on the west coast of Sweden, in the city of Gothenburg. So, also in Europe, it started at writing clinics, writing laboratories. We have professional writing consultants, and this is where you will find yourselves as professionals dealing with this. We have, or had, writing centers based on the American tradition. The first kind of American writing centers dealing with L1, that is your first language. So the American writing centers dealt with English, obviously. And now, since we're transferring this model to a European setting, this becomes a bit problematic because we don't have, well, there are some countries, Britain, that have English as the first language, but our other countries don't. So that plays an important role in formulating and changing the idea of the writing center in Europe. So we also changed them from writing support to writing centers. Again, the idea of your paper is really bad, go and have it fixed, and then hand it in to me. So, what about a writing center at the University of Technology? The first question is, writing? At the University of Technology, we do this. Right? You do. But you write? Right? Yeah. But do the students write? They have to? Yeah? And perhaps this is something that is changing too. So if we look at Chalmers Writing Center, it was started in 2008 as a response to the fact that all our master's programs were to be delivered in English. So in 2008, well, the decision was made earlier, but in 2008, all the master's programs at Chalmers were in English. So the medium of instruction is English now at all master level courses. So then we thought, this is going to be a big change from having all the education in Swedish to having it in English. And having it in English also meant that we would get more students from abroad, because very few want to come to Sweden and study in Swedish. So with English, the world opened up. So then we saw students coming in, and then we thought, okay, so we might need to have some kind of structure for this. And then we thought a writing center might be a good idea. We do have peer tutors in our writing center. So these are students picked from different disciplines, and they are trained to become peer tutors. We started out thinking that it would be an English writing center, and to a large degree that is still true, but we see more and more of this. And that is going to be interesting to see if you will see that too. Because, you know, there is a misconception that because it's your native tongue, then there are no problems writing. And at a certain level, that's probably true. Students coming here can write. But can they write within the discipline? Do they understand the requirements of academic discourse and the disciplinary requirements within the different engineering or science fields? So that might be different, and that is something we definitely see as our writing center. So we're establishing this in engineering education. This is not a generic writing center where everyone can come, but it's focusing on engineering education and therefore engineering writing and the different genres and text types we see in that. Some acronyms. It's always fun with acronyms. English as a foreign language, English for specific purposes, English for academic purposes. But then we also saw Swedish as a first language, Swedish for specific, Swedish as a second language, Swedish for specific purposes, Swedish for academic purposes. Yeah, so that's a tall order, isn't it? But the writing center is coexisting with the Division for Language and Communication where I work, where we have courses in English, in Swedish, in engineering writing, and primarily we integrate our courses and activities in engineering courses. So when students have a project where they are to design a solution to an engineering problem, they write a report and we come in and help them write that report. So we teach within the context of engineering education. Well, we try to, at least. So what is it then? What writing or communication happens at Chalmers? Well, I think you will recognize some of this at least. We have different assignments. Different teachers have different assignments. It might be very short, it might be long. An assignment might be an exam, and in the exam the students need to write. But they also write lab reports, they have project work, they have presentations like this. They might write proposals, and towards the end they do their thesis work. So they write their thesis. And then there are lots of other things going on, argumentation, reflection, and so on. I can't click on that, I need to click on this. And that can then be further sort of broken down into this. So the languages, Swedish English in our case, paragraph and grammar, style, structure. You'll recognize that as sort of the building blocks of a text. What about referencing, avoiding plagiarism, avoiding copying someone else's text, and so on? Adapting your text to the specific audience. So what is this text going to do? Who is going to read it? And therefore adopting the style and structure, for instance. So there are so many different layers and different things that we need to take care of when we talk about writing. So language is one part, but then there are other things as well. So when we work in a writing center, or actually with writing in a specific discipline, we need to negotiate things. We need to negotiate language. We need to negotiate culture and context. And these can be on all kinds of levels. Culture can be the cultures of different nationalities, but it could also be the cultures of different academic backgrounds. The context is, of course, engineering education, but engineering education is a large field, so engineering education has different strands. If you study mathematics in a course, that will be very different from studying management, for instance. But both are part, perhaps, of engineering education, because you need to manage a project. from a Chalmers point of view, we have our engineering education. Then we have our Swedish students, we have Chinese students, Pakistani students, German, Italian, whatnot. So we have lots of different students coming to Chalmers and therefore also coming to the Writing Center. And I put the word negotiating because I think that's very important. It has to do with coming to some kind of agreement of what we are mentally there to do and what are the constraints, what are the restrictions on what we can do. So English as language of instruction, that is something difficult. That is something we need to negotiate. How is that done? How can we deal with that? How do Swedish students deal with that compared to Italian students or Chinese students? We come in at different levels, and I've learned here at MISiS that there are many different levels of language proficiency with the students. Some come in at a very basic level and some are more advanced, so taking care of that mixture. And in our case we have a Swedish and international academic context. So the students come to a traditionally Swedish academic context, but that is only true to a certain extent because we do have a lot of faculty from other countries. So this is mixing and becoming more and more international. And with the influx of international students, the entire educational system at Chalmers becomes more and more international, but still within a Swedish context, because this context is the Swedish societal context. So as soon as you leave this and go out to shop or something, well, then that's a completely Swedish situation. So we have lots of potential clashes how to deal with this. And in your case, this would be Russian international, Russian societal context. And English as a language of instruction in some cases, or Russian. So figuring out how does this all work together, what are the potential problems with this, how can students engage in engineering education regarding these different constraints. And that's why we have a philosophy, that's why we have a pedagogy for writing centers, because we cannot solve everything. We can solve a lot, but not everything. First and foremost, writing centers are not a remedy, that is a cure to illness. It's not a quick fix. So if a student struggles with her or his writing, that's not an illness. That's a natural process. We all start somewhere. So instead of this quick fix or remedy to illness, it's a place where learning takes place, where tools are explored, where understanding is negotiated, and where we create meaning and knowledge. So that is really the essential part of a writing center. Learning, that is what it's all about. But of course, where writing skills and text are improved. So it's not just some elusive idea of learning takes place, but we actually do things as well. We work with texts, but we work with students. We work together, and therefore it's a collaborative learning effort. So when I work with students, hopefully they will learn, but definitely I will also learn. I shouldn't do that. Because something happens in the discussion. I learn more about the students. I learn more about what is difficult in a text. And therefore I can adapt and adopt strategies to take care of that. And I learn to become a better and better tutor, hopefully. I think this is really important for a writing center, finding good sources, finding tools that you can use, because we can utilize this rather than just relying on our own experience. Our own experience is vital and very important, but we cannot know everything, nor should we. Because if we knew everything, and sometimes we might know quite a lot, it means we tend to transfer or try to transfer that knowledge. And that doesn't necessarily mean that learning takes place. It means that I tell someone what to do. And they say, oh, great, I'll do that. Don't know why, but he told me. So therefore, exploring or finding resources, I think, is very important. Partly, to have that for your own sake, but also to have that and explore that together with the students in the writing center. So a tutoring session is very much of finding resources, using tools, and equipping the students, so that they, the next time, can say, all right, yeah, I can look that up here, and that's a good way of dealing with it. And sometimes, even if you know the answer, take out the book and let's have a look together, so that the student can see that sources are something that they can use. A tutoring session should be, ideally anyway, based on open questions. So not only having the student coming there asking questions, but actually as tutors asking the students questions. So what do you mean by that? Have you looked at this? What could you explain what it is you're after? And that sort of thing, because that triggers the thinking, and thereby discussing the text. Discussing the strengths and the weaknesses in the text, but try to have the student formulating this first. So what is it you would like us to do here today? Well, I want you to read my text and see if it's good. No, we don't do that. But if you're worried about, well, I'm not sure if I've understood how to write this paragraph in the right way, well, let's look at it then. But not shifting the responsibility to the tutor, because the writer is always and shall always be responsible for her or his text. Then we can work systematically over time, so a student can come back. So it's not a one-off, but you can start an idea, work on that, and maybe, I don't know how long your sessions will be. We have 45-minute sessions at Chalmers. So obviously you can't cope with a master thesis in 45 minutes, or basically any text. But you can start with different parts of it. And not taking charge as a tutor, but enabling the tutor, the writer to do the work. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about the strategies, how to do all of this, from the very simple things: who has the text in front of her or him? Who holds the pen? How do we sit? And all of that might matter. So what is it students need when they knock on your door? Is it proofreading? They will say yes, because that's great, isn't it? Is it grammar? Probably. But the actual need might turn out to be something else, because sometimes it's very difficult for students to articulate what it is they're after. So, or it's the grammar. But when you look at it, yes, there are some grammatical issues, but really your ideas are all over the place. There is no structure in the text, for instance. So the Writing Center is a place where you can discuss the writing process, and that is something I think we're going to explore today. What is the writing process, but primarily what is the writing process for you? How to structure, how to organize a text, the logic, the rhetoric of a text. Learn more about different text types or genres, explore language and style, improve spelling, grammar, and mechanics. So all of this is something that happens in tutoring sessions in a writing center. Perhaps not all at once, but as you can see, there are all kinds of activities and at all kinds of levels. And that means we have to have some kind of priority of how we deal with this. And here we usually talk about higher order concerns and later order concerns. It used to be higher order concerns and lesser order concerns, but that's not really true. But it's the first order of things, how we deal with it, not whether it's more or less important. Because, of course, spelling, grammar is also important. The mechanics of a text is also important. But if you don't have understood what kind of genre this is, what is the audience, how you organize it, then spelling is perhaps a later question. So, yes, does it help? Or would it be more beneficial to just look at the language of the text? And many students who come in, many teachers who in some way or another send their students to come to the Writing Center think it's this. And some get kind of annoyed when we start talking about, well, what about the organization? What about the main ideas in your text? How to structure that? Oh no, I just need to get these sentences right so I can hand it in to my teacher. My teacher says, my grammar is so poor, or I need to fix my spelling. Again, it might actually be a question of not being able to articulate what the problem is. So a writing center should focus on the writer. So not only on the text. They will come with the text, and that will be important, but the focus is on the writer, and thereby on the future texts that this students will write. In a very good situation, and in most situations, yes, the student will come in with a text and walk out with a better text. But the main idea is that the student come in as a writer and walk out as a better writer. So empowerment, empowering the students, giving them access to the discourse, to how to write, to the tools and the resources, giving the students options when they write, allowing the students to grow through their own learning. I talked about the remedy to illness, the quick fix. So who are these students? Who are they coming to the Writing Center? Well, surprise, surprise, we have students coming who struggle with writing and language. We have students who want to practice speaking English. Yes, so we have students coming in. Their writing is okay, because that they've learned, but they're really shy, they don't want to speak, the pronunciation they're worried about, etc. They can't really make themselves heard in the classroom. So they come to the Writing Center because it's not a dangerous situation. They can sit with someone and actually start speaking. So we have had, I got a very, very, very nice letter from a student who went to the Writing Center. It was 2 years ago when he started his master's. He was from Korea, and he was really afraid of speaking English, didn't want to speak English, but he thought, I have all of these ideas in the classroom, but I dare not speak. And when I speak, people don't understand me. So he came to the Writing Center and booked session after session, week after week, and essentially year after year. And now he says, I speak. I can stand up in my classroom and I can speak and people understand me and I can make my ideas come through. So that, if nothing else, that is evidence of the power of a Writing Center, I think, and its student focus. Students who want to decipher an assignment, their professor has given them the assignment and they're struggling, well, what are we supposed to do? So sometimes it's having a look at the assignment, see if we can figure out what it means. Sometimes the answer is, well, I think you have to go back to your professor and ask. And sometimes we've seen that, and I, as a director, have actually gone to a teacher who's written an assignment, which is a very good assignment, but it's been very difficult to decipher. And we discussed, is it possible to write this in a different way? What is it you want? So it goes two ways, really. We also see very proficient writers who want to have an opinion on their writing. So they write really well, but they want someone to discuss their text with. Do you really think my ideas are clear here? Should I put more emphasis on this, etc., etc.? So, who comes to the Writing Center? Any student does. Yes, we see perhaps more of these, but we do see these as well. And that is also so nice, to have this variety and seeing that the Writing Center is not a remedy to illness, but something for everyone. So even the tutors sometimes come to the Writing Center to meet another tutor to discuss their text. So we see on the proficiency continuum, we see both ends and all those in the middle. At our Writing Center, we have peer tutors. As I understand it, that will not be the case here. So you will have professional tutors. But nevertheless, I think there are some commonalities between these two anyway. When we have peer tutors, we see less hierarchy because there is no assessment, and that will be true also of your Writing Center. So if they go and see their teacher, they know that there is a hierarchical difference, that the teacher will do the assessment of their text, so they might be sort of not willing to discuss their text that much. Peer tutors can share experiences. Yes, I've had a similar assignment. I did this. Or when I was writing my bachelor thesis, I remember this. So having gone through the same system is very good. And the collaborative learning aspect of it, of course. That something is happening when you sit and discuss together. What about the ethos, the credibility? Do students think that, well, that's just another student? What can he tell me? Are there cultural differences in that approach, belief in peer learning? I think there is. We've seen that. So that might take some time in establishing what is going to happen here. What is expertise and what is collaborative learning? So from a Swedish perspective, this has turned out not to be a problem. Students are very willing to come and discuss things with a peer. When we do this in the classroom, you know, when the classmates give peer response to each other's work, that works also very well. But sometimes we have students from other countries where they have a very hierarchical system, where the teacher is the expert and the sole expert, and we're just there to absorb that knowledge. Then some of these students are more reluctant on having a fellow student sitting next to them. Could you read this and give me some comments? What kind of comments could you give? We're just students. Let's ask him. But what we see when we look at the responses we get from evaluations from the Writing Center is that tutors are seen as peers, equals, but also as professionals. The Writing Center and language issues and foreign language issues, that's a challenge. But the Writing Center is not necessarily only or primarily a language service. Language is a very important and vital part of what we're doing. There is no getting around that, and maybe it's the foundation of what we're doing. But it's not the whole story, because the Writing Center promotes the process of writing, promotes the process of helping students negotiating the disciplinary genres to help the students become part of the academic community, so that they understand what is going on here. How do we talk about my subject? How do we structure our ideas within this discipline? Where again, mathematics will be different from the more applied sciences, for instance. And the more complex we do inter- or cross-disciplinary kinds of projects and so on, it becomes increasingly difficult understanding how do we actually go about thinking about it and then, of course, communicating it. The question of recruiting tutors. How do we recruit tutors? How were you recruited? You were told to come here.
I guess mostly invited.
Invited?
Interesting thing to know about.
Yeah.
To share experience.
Great.
To get involved. So personal interest is easier to move on than just being told to do.
Very good. Very good. So, there are a couple of things. Being well-versed, knowing the discipline, perhaps knowing generic writing skills, having good language skills, having good people skills. So should we pick one with knowing the discipline or one with good people skills? Where should we begin? So perhaps a mix is best. What we have at our Writing Center are people or students then, master students from, we also have a PhD student now, from the different engineering disciplines, but we also have students from language departments who are studying language or writing or communication. So today we have a mix. We started out with only engineering students, but now we have a mix. And now that mix has tended to be heavier on the language people. So now I'm trying to get back the engineering students because I really want them there. Because we need knowing, understanding the discipline. Yes. So we should find tutors based on interest and engagement. If you want this, then you will be a good tutor. But you will need good training, to learn how to become a tutor. This is not something we, well, it's not that it's a strange thing, it's a natural thing, but still it needs to be structured in some kind of way. And I think very important is also to ensure some kind of continuity, that tutors stay for a while and that you don't change every tutor at once. But when one is no longer going to be a tutor, then you bring in a new one and so on, so that you become a community where experiences can be shared. Because, you know, there are books on how to tutor, how to become a peer tutor, how to become a tutor, and how to deal with writing center pedagogy and so on. But that's from a very generic point of view. This writing center, this academic writing center at MISiS will be unique in many ways. Because you have a special situation, you are special people, so you bring in your experiences, your backgrounds, your personalities into this. So, finding a place for the writing center. A writing center is and needs to be contextualized and adapted to their unique environment. So you will need to find a way that works well here at MISiS. Depending on the students coming, depending on what writing goes on, depending on a lot of different reasons, really. When establishing a writing center or when maintaining a writing center, we need to establish the raison d'être, the reason for being. We need to make some kind of needs analysis. And often when we start, it might not prove to be what we first expected. So this is a journey that you will begin to explore. Yes, that's a question for you. So how is it funded? Can we make sure we get money so that we can establish this and make it go on? So it's not a, here's the money and next year, no money, sorry. And this is something that all writing centers all over the world are struggling with. Except Chalmers. No, I'm just kidding. The demographics of the student body. Who are they? Where do they come from? Their academic backgrounds. The diversity in language levels. The diversity in where they come from geographically. All of that. And we need to make sure there is a way of continuing recruiting tutors. Both to expand, but also ensure that it continues. And etc. So in conclusion, the ethos or the credibility of a writing center is the empowerment of students, the collaborative learning, and also the acclaim we do get from students and teachers. So students come and say, this was really helpful. I've learned a lot. Teachers coming to say, wow, what a service. My students actually deliver much better papers now, after having been to the writing center more than one time. So the writing center is not in isolation. It should be seen as a complement to other initiatives. So to what other language writing instruction initiatives there are at the university. So this is not, we can't do away with all of that and think that the writing center will solve that. But in combination with that, the writing center will be a powerful institution. And there, I think I'm going to stop with the black screen. So, are we going to turn that off now? Or, yeah. So what I think we are going to do now is start discussing your ideas of a writing center, your ideas what you would like to do as a tutor, perhaps a little bit about your own experience, what you have written before. And I think we're going to start with the writing process, what it means to you, how you write.